Two kingdoms, many gods. Rethinking the religious landscape of ancient Israel and Judah, abstract the common perception that ancient Israel and Judah were two Yahweh-worshipping sister kingdoms grounded in a shared Mosaic tradition is not supported by the archaeological, epigraphic, or textual evidence. Instead, the historical record points to a complex, polytheistic religious environment in which Yahweh was one deity among several, and in which the Torah, far from being an ancient constitutional document, was largely unknown to the population until the late monarchic and post-exilic periods. This article synthesizes archaeological data, biblical criticism, and comparative Near Eastern religion to argue that the Torah emerged as a late ideological project, not an early national tradition, and that the religious identities of Israel and Judah were distinct, fluid, and only retroactively harmonized by later Judean scribes. 1. Introduction. Modern readers often assume that ancient Israel and Judah shared a unified Yahwistic faith rooted in the Mosaic covenant, the Ten Commandments, and the laws of the Torah. This assumption is largely shaped by the biblical narrative itself, which presents the Torah as the foundational charter of the nation and depicts deviations from Yahweh-exclusive worship as aberrations or apostasies. However, the archaeological and textual record paints a different picture. The earliest evidence for Israel does not associate the group with Yahweh. Judah, meanwhile, appears to have developed a distinctive Yahweh cult with southern origins, separate from the northern traditions. Most strikingly, the biblical accounts of the discovery of the Torah under Hezekiah-Josiah, and again under Ezra, suggest that the laws of Moses were not widely known or practiced in either kingdom. This article argues that the religious worlds of Israel and Judah were far more diverse than the later biblical narrative suggests, and that the Torah emerged as a late, post-exilic synthesis rather than an early national inheritance. 2. Israel's early religion, a federation without a Torah. The earliest extra-biblical reference to Israel appears on the Merneptah stele, which identifies Israel as a socio-ethnic group in Canaan, but makes no mention of Yahweh, Moses, or covenantal law. Archaeological surveys of Iron Age Highland settlements show no central cultic authority, no Yahwistic iconography, no evidence of exclusive monotheism, widespread use of L-theophoric names. Not Yahwistic ones. This suggests that early Israel was a loose coalition of clans whose religious practices were rooted in broader Canaanite traditions. Deities such as El, Baal, and Asherah appear to have been central to Israelite worship. The inscriptions from Kuntalit Adrud are particularly revealing. References to Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah indicate Yahweh was worshipped regionally, not universally. Asherah was venerated alongside Yahweh. Israelite religion was syncretistic, not exclusive. Nothing in this period suggests knowledge of a Mosaic Torah or a centralized Yahweh-only cult. 3. Judah's distinctive Yahwism. A southern origin. Judah's religious development followed a different trajectory. Egyptian texts refer to the Shesu of YHW, a group associated with the southern deserts of Edom, Seir, and Midian. Biblical poetry preserves this memory. Yahweh came from Seir, from Edom his splendor, from Paran he shone forth. These traditions point to a southern origin for Yahweh worship, distinct from the northern highland traditions of Israel. Judah in the early Iron Age was small, rural, and relatively isolated. Its religious practices appear to have been more centralized and more closely tied to royal ideology. Yet even in Judah, archaeological evidence shows widespread polytheism. Household shrines, female figurines associated with Asherah, multiple cultic sites outside Jerusalem, amulets invoking deities other than Yahweh. Judah was not a Torah-observant society. It was a polytheistic kingdom with a developing Yahweh cult that only later became exclusive. 4. The discovery of the Torah under Hezekiah Josiah, one of the most striking pieces of evidence for the late emergence of the Torah, is the biblical account of its discovery in the temple during the reign of Hezekiah or Josiah. The narrative describes a book found in the temple, the king hearing it read for the first time, the king tearing his clothes in shock. A national reform launched in response. This reaction is inexplicable if the Torah had been widely known or practiced. The king behaves not as a guardian of an ancient tradition, but as someone encountering a new religious ideology. Most scholars identify the discovered text as an early form of Deuteronomy. Its central themes, exclusive Yahwism, centralized worship in Jerusalem, covenantal loyalty, align with Josiah's reform agenda. The episode suggests the Torah was not known in Judah before the 7th century BCE. Mosaic law was not practiced. The population had no memory of Sinai Moses or the 10 Commandments. The Deuteronomistic movement was introducing, not restoring, a tradition. This is a foundational challenge to the traditional narrative. 5. Ezra's reading, a second discovery. Centuries later, after the Babylonian exile, Ezra reads the Torah to the people of Jerusalem. The reaction is again one of shock and unfamiliarity. The people weep. They require Levites to explain the meaning. They discover the festival of Sukkot. The text states that no one had kept Sukkot since the days of Joshua. This admission is extraordinary. It implies the Torah was not practiced during the First Temple period. The laws were not transmitted across generations. The population had no living memory of Mosaic traditions. Ezra's reading is not a reminder of an ancient covenant, but the introduction of a new national charter. 6. Polytheism as the norm. Archaeological evidence overwhelmingly supports the view that polytheism was the norm in both Israel and Judah. Cultic figurines, multiple altars, inscriptions invoking multiple deities, syncretistic worship practices. Elephantine Jews in the 5th century BCE worshiping Yahweh, and not even practices often assumed to be ancient identity markers appear late or inconsistently. Circumcision widespread in the region. Not uniquely Israelite, not universally practiced in Judah. Dietary laws. Pig bones appear in Israelite sites until the late Iron Age. No evidence of systematic dietary restrictions. Sabbath. No pre-exilic evidence of Sabbath observance, likely developed during or after the exile. Exclusive Yahwism emerges strongly only after the fall of Israel, and especially during the exile. 7. The Torah as a post-exilic ideological project. The cumulative evidence suggests that the Torah was not an ancient constitution, but a late ideological synthesis created by Judean scribes during and after the exile. Its goals included unifying diverse traditions under a single narrative, centralizing religious authority in Jerusalem, promoting exclusive Yahwism, recasting Israel's past as a story of covenant and apostasy, creating a new identity for a post-exilic community. The Torah retrojects this ideology into the deep past, presenting it as the ancient foundation of the nation. But the historical record shows that this foundation did not exist in the early monarchic period. Ever did God have a wife? John Day, Yahweh and the gods and goddesses of Canaan on Deuteronomy, and Josiah's reform. Richard Elliott Friedman, who wrote the Bible. Bernard Levinson, Deuteronomy, and the Hermeneutics of Legal Innovation. Thomas Romer, the so-called Deuteronomistic history on Ezra, the exile, and the formation of the Torah. Jacob L. Wright, Why the Bible Began. David Carr, The Formation of the Hebrew Bible. Conrad Schmid, The Old Testament, A Literary History, Archaeology, and Material Culture. Abraham Faust, Israel's Ethnogenesis. Carol Myers, Household Religion in Ancient Israel. Francesca Stavrokopoulou and John Barton, Religious Diversity in Ancient Israel and Judah.